Episode 37 of the Rain Race podcast here tonight. As always, I'm joined alongside Racing Nation TV, aka Kyle Cuthbertson.
What's up?
We got a couple things to talk about tonight. Again, another week with no motorsports news to recap. Just kind of stuck in the beginning of the season, not January, February at this point, mid-February. Shows how far behind I am. You may be keen to point out, the Daytona 500. We don't really talk about NASCAR that much on this podcast, mainly because I don't pay attention to NASCAR enough to actually talk about it. But I will say a congratulations to Michael McDowell, who does have a road racing background, for what it's worth, on winning the Daytona 500. And I also wanted to say a quick, have a quick moment for Bob Jenkins, who has revealed his diagnosis with brain cancer this morning. Obviously, Bob Jenkins, we've actually worked with him very briefly in the past for something on Kyle's channel. Just all around a great guy, a great voice who's been known across different series for commentary over the decades. And we just wish him the best. And hopefully in the future, I might even be able to start up a donation thing to help out Bob if somebody sets up a GoFundMe or something along those lines. Anyways, on some brighter news. Well, actually, this isn't so much brighter, because the first thing I want to talk about today is Mazda terminating their DPI program at the end of the season, which is, especially for me, being a Mazda fan, kind of a disappointment. People have pointed out that the writing was on the wall for that one, and I think that it's kind of accurate considering Mazda dropped down to a one-car program this year. The 77 is no more. It's just the 55 now. Some of the staff from the 77, including engineer Lena Gade, moved over to the 55 this season. But it was just revealed late last week that the 55 in the entire Mazda Motorsports program would be no more in IMSA. Kyle, quick thoughts on that?
Obviously, you're right. The writing, I think, was on the wall for this to happen after they went to one car. But what's just very disappointing in this is when you're in a time in sports car racing when you have all these manufacturer announcements of going to LMDh, and you get that one where it's, we're not going to go to LMDh. We're actually dropping out, and it's a pretty sad thing to watch unfold.
Yeah, there are actually a couple more things to break down with this announcement. The first thing I saw that was notable was Nelson Cosgrove, who just took over as the head of Mazda Motorsports after John Doonan got promoted to IMSA president, which was 2020. He's already being replaced at his seat by, I forget that Mo Murray is taking over his seat effective immediately. Effective at the end of the month as the director of Mazda Motorsports, which I found a little bit interesting because, as I said, Nelson hasn't been in that position for that long. Now, as for the future, I think, this kind of makes sense in some way when you look at LMDh, because the thing I actually didn't include in there is that Mazda, and I think you said this, Kyle, Mazda's not pursuing an LMDh program. So that leads me to believe that Multimatic, they're certainly going to be wanting to work with somebody. And I think that the obvious name to sort of fit that role would be Ford. I don't know if you have any opinions on that. Ford has worked with Multimatic. They're still working with Multimatic right now on the Ford GT Mark II.
I actually didn't think about that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I just think that would be sort of a logical path for Multimatic to go down. That was actually something I was wondering about for a little while, is where Mazda would actually end up going and what Multimatic more specifically would do if Ford had intended on coming back, because Ford right now does have a pretty solid relationship with Multimatic, I've noticed. There's not too much else to go over for that announcement. It's just kind of, it's a blow to IMSA for sure. I think the Mazdas they've had, a huge fan base because that's one of those teams where you're kind of invested in it. I know me personally, it's like, all right, this was a team that was trying to get a win all the way since they started in IMSA in 2014 with the Speed Source Diesel, and they didn't get a win until 2019 at Watkins Glen. I think that was a team that people really rode to the end with, and it's going to be a great shame to see them go. But I think it does open more doors for the future than it really closes right now because, like we were talking about Multimatic, what's going to happen with all of that? There's
I mean,
another.
there was something released today about Andretti Autosport wanting to be involved in IMSA.
Yeah, so I was just going to bring that up as well. That was actually an article that was posted to Racer.com by Marshall Pruitt. I found that a little bit interesting. I mean, it's not, it's not a complete bombshell story, but Andretti Autosport wanting to step up to LMDh is definitely noteworthy. And I started to think of like manufacturers that they might be able to work with. I was thinking first of all Acura. I mean, they've already committed to an LMDh program, and then also BMW because
Yep.
Andretti right now works with BMW for the factory Formula E program, which is ending, and BMW has shown interest in LMDh, so that's a possibility as well.
I mean, Acura, they've also worked with Acura before in the past, in ALMS, and they're working with HPD in IndyCar currently.
Yeah,
So, a few paths, that they could go, and obviously they'd be targeting. It's a few years out. They'd be targeting a 2023, obviously. So a couple of years to get that down. A couple of years.
yeah, and I mean, the thing that I've also noticed with the Mazda announcement, and I pointed this out to somebody, is how quickly sports car classes can fall. I wouldn't say,
Hmm.
DPI certainly hasn't fallen to the level of GTE or LMP1 yet. Um, but I mean, you're looking at a class that last season had Penske, they had JDC, two Mazdas. I mean, Cadillac with Action Express, Wayne Taylor. I can go down the list. They had Tequila Patron ESM a couple of years ago. And, you think, oh, wow, this is like in a golden era right now, just like we were thinking with LMP1 back in 2015, 2016. And then a few seasons later, a couple teams leave, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, what's going to be the replacement to this? Because this obviously doesn't have a bright future. Um, I mean, that's something that I noticed with sports car racing categories, and it's really been enhanced sort of by this whole thing because Mazda, they were a factory program. They brought a ton of, I think, attention to the sport, as I had mentioned earlier. Um, and it just generally sucks to lose an OEM because when you go to a sports car race, when you go like into the paddock, you'll notice that these manufacturers like Mazda and Lexus, BMW, they'll all have these giant displays set up. I think that they bring more value to attracting outside fans than say a team like Meyer Shank would or Wayne Taylor Racing, and nothing to knock those teams down, but I think that a factory program definitely brings a little bit more merit when it comes to attracting the common man to your series.
Do you think that Mazda leaving could, possibly be showing kind of a weakness in the DPI formula in that, because when you think about it, DPI or LMDh as it's going to become is still going to be based off LMP2 chassis with, manufacturer built bodywork. So Mazda obviously using the Riley. Do you think, them using the Riley, an LMP2 chassis that's not used currently in really anything has something to do with it? And with that, chassis not really being as competitive. And when you think about it, the chassis future of LMP2, you, right now it's just Oreca and the who else runs? It's the Ligier still has like a couple, right? I know Dallara is pretty much out now because the
Right.
Celatar car is gone. So do you think that kind of like is starting to show kind of a flaw in DPI at this point for the future?
I mean, not really, honestly. I think because LMDh is built off the same concept, where it's
Yeah.
built off an LMP2 car still. Um, and you kind of bring up a nice point. Where is that something that they should be looking at for the LMDh regulations? I don't think that was a problem for Mazda. They certainly struggled in the first season with their DPI car, and then they got they were allowed to do an upgrade,
Hmm.
and Riley themselves were allowed to upgrade their car as well. At that point, it was really Multimatic. Um, Sorry, feeling a little bit under the weather today. Um, but no, I don't think that was a reason for it. I think overall, Mazda had the pace. They were winning races. They won like 3 or 4 races in a row back in 2019. I mean, they were potentially a legit contender for the championship last year. They just started making some mistakes towards the end of the season. And, I don't see any reason why they couldn't be a contender for the championship this season. I think Mazda right now, certainly with them getting a new director of motorsports, they're going through a restructuring period. And, when I say it's nice to have these big name manufacturers with factory teams, that's true. But the problem with big name factory teams is that they're under complete scrutiny of a board of directors. So, we saw this with Audi and LMP1 and Porsche and LMP1, where the team itself can have this huge inspiration and motivation to run, and they're pretty much running their A game. You can talk about Multimatic doing that. You can talk about Yost doing it with Audi. And then, somebody on the board of directors can pull the funding, and that's the end of that. It's really up to the men in suits when it comes to the factory teams. That's sort of the problem with them, if you had to pick a downside. And I think that's probably what happened to Mazda here. They're just trying to go through a restructuring period. Maybe the pandemic hit them a little bit more than they were expecting it to. We'll have to see. I haven't heard anything else to this point, but I certainly don't think it had anything to do with like the chassis, though.
I mean, it is an interesting point to think about in DPI because, something, you have to think about that's interesting is the, I mean, at least I think the future of DPI and how well it does, it also is dependent on the future of LMP2. Because if you look at, I think I was probably making jokes during the 24 Hours of Le Mans last year that, you know, over 90% of the field was Orecas. It's pretty much a spec class. And, for the 2021 roster, as of right now, it's all Orecas and one Ligier. And so, you know, and how many manufacturers are interested in joining LMP2 right now? And when you have this many manufacturers coming in and in a LMP2, base chassis class, it makes you wonder what chassis is Audi going to use? What's the future going to be? Because then also you think about the Cadillac's obviously been very successful, is still successful, not a problem there. But with the Dallara kind of not being in use right now, are they going to continue to just keep using that for however long? Is it going to turn into like Daytona prototypes where we're just using the same, tub and chassis for 10 years at a time, but we're just going to change up the bodywork a little bit? I mean, and also, with how the LMDh, regulations are and adding the spec hybrid system, you're going to need, I think you're going to need more manufacturer or chassis manufacturers coming into LMP2 to help LMDh, which, could be a problem in the future.
Well, okay, here's my comment about the LMP2 regulations. The current LMP2 regulations that were introduced in 2017, they blew it. The I've been researching like the 2011 24 Hours of Le Mans. I have a video coming out hopefully later this week about a certain LMP1 car that ran in that race. Didn't run too well. But the point is that I was looking at the LMP2 class while I was sort of researching that race, and the variety of cars that you had in that class was just astounding. I mean, it was almost like, it had way more of a storyline, I think. You even had a hybrid running in LMP2 that year. The problem with the current LMP2 regulations is that it was built around this concept of, okay, we're going to try to keep it as cheap as possible while also having the cars be quick. So the way they try to make it as cheap as possible is to limit development. Well, the problem with that is, okay, you go out of the gate, and Orica seems like they're the strongest manufacturer, just hands down. Um, and you
by
try to
far.
give the other manufacturers a little bit of a break. They can play around a little bit to see if they can catch up to Orica. But the problem was that none of them really were able to truly catch the Orica in terms of pace. And, that's fine and everything, but at the same time, a lot of the manufacturers weren't even really given that much of a chance. And at that point, okay, you have a class that's built around customer teams, like say GT3 is, and what is the gut reaction to do when you're running? You got four cars in front of you. You have the Multimatic Riley, you have the Orica, Dallara, and the Ligier, and you can go out and buy any one of them to run your program. Which one are you going to choose? And that's why it's become a completely Orica focused. People sometimes make the joke that it's like the Orica Championship or whatever in the European Le Mans series, which actually the European Le Mans series has more entries that aren't Orica than the World Endurance Championship, I believe. And yeah, it's really taken away the interest, I think, in the class, because even if you look, I referenced the 2011 24 Hours of Le Mans when you had, I can't even count off the top of my head how many LMP2 like different cars. They weren't all competitive, but at least you had that interest there, and you had different cars that were sort of, you had a story to go with it. I think that's one of the biggest things in sports car racing is even if you don't have the closest competition, if you have some of the best stories, that can be what makes the race interesting. And I'm not too sure what the plans are for the next LMP2 regulations. I assume there's some of this, like, somewhat of the same story, where they're going to limit development, which is fine. I don't want a cost war in LMP2. It's completely unnecessary. But the problem is, like I said, if you have a team that gets an advantage straight out of the gate, it just becomes a problem. Macaulay Davies said the regulation changes should possibly be more regular. It should. It quickly changes from golden era to stale racing. Yeah, of course that's sort of a double-edged sword thing, where I agree with you on that. I think that the regulations, if you have a class like DPI right now where you're just gonna have two manufacturers next season, I think that you can easily say, yeah, it's time that we swing in some new regulations, get more manufacturers in, and that's what they're planning on doing with LMDh. The problem is with that is you're now driving costs up. So if you drive costs up and you get new regulations, you might attract some new manufacturers, but you're also going to turn away some of the smaller teams like Meyer Shank, who just stepped up to the plate with DPI. Yeah, it's a pain to even think about because, like I've mentioned, it's a double-edged sword.
I mean, it's just kind of alarming at this rate. I mean, because think about it. How many? I mean, one Ligier in the 2021. I mean, do you know when the next LMP2 regulations are due to happen?
I believe it was 2023 or 24. I don't know.
So around the
There
same
was,
time as LMDh.
yeah.
So
Well,
that's
because
something to think about.
the new LMDh cars are supposed to be based around the new spec LMP2 cars.
Right. So it's kind of alarming to me. Well, it's kind of interesting to me. Have there been any LMP2 manufacturers? I mean, if nobody, say it's just Oreca, is that alarming to you for LMDh's sake?
I mean, not for LMDh's sake. No, I don't think so. I think it's more alarming for LMP2 at that point. Because LMDh, you can still go around and you can throw your own engine in it and you can throw your own bodywork on it. You can at least make them look different.
Well, I guess it's more of an opinion for me, but because I, frankly wouldn't, because it's still obviously, like you said, it'd be different engines, different bodywork. It'd be different, but I honestly wouldn't enjoy as much a spec chassis field pretty much as much as when we had the when DPI first came, and it was pretty much every manufacturer had a different chassis to go with it, and it was cool. That was, I think that's one of the best parts of DPI, was that every car had a different chassis as well as a different body. It was just, everything felt different, even though it was based off LMP2 and nobody was actually building their own stuff. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's something I'm worried about if it's just Oreca and all these manufacturers coming into LMDh will just be all using the same chassis, just putting their own stuff on it.
All right, so I just looked up the timeline for the future of sports car racing that was unveiled at the 2020 Rolex 24.
Oh, so I should know this because I was at that announcement.
Yes.
Great. Way
Well,
for me
yeah,
to
it's
pay
been
attention.
a long year.
All I
And
remember
some
from that
since
day
then,
was convergence, and I left, and I just went to Dave, and I'm like, what the heck were they talking about?
all right, so
I
so
kind of understood it, but at the same time, they were saying some confusing things.
so this timeline was back when the pandemic wasn't yet a huge thing, and LMDh was supposed to be introduced in 2022. That has since been moved back to 2023. The new LMP2 class was supposed to be debuting in mid 2022, which is because the World Endurance Championship was still doing their winter season, which they now are just doing standard regular seasons now, starting in the
Super
spring.
season.
Well, no, super season was 2018 when they had two Le Mans races, or 2018, 2019. So yeah, I would expect that would have been moved back to 2023 naturally. So I'd say, yeah, new LMP2 cars should debut alongside the new LMDh cars, which makes sense. I don't know why I said 2024. I just thought, you know what, I was thinking about the hydrogen class. I was actually mixing that up. Which the hydrogen class, I don't know if that's going to even be able to start during the expected time. But yeah, I guess we're going to have to just wait to see what the interest looks like for the new LMP2 class. I haven't seen too much news on it quite yet.
I've seen nothing, which is what's been alarming to me. I've seen nothing on the LMP2 interest or anything coming, out of it.
Yeah,
I mean, I would assume since there's so many, Orecas being ran today that they would be for sure, coming.
Well, yeah, I fully expect them to be back. We'll have to see, because I'm trying to think of when the 4 manufacturers were announced for the current set of LMP2 regulations. See if a quick Google search might help me with that. Okay, so it was 2015 when the 4 manufacturers were announced for the 2017 LMP2 regulations. So 2 years, we'll say a year and a half because it was July 2015. Well, a year and a half to 2023 would be this summer. So I think around this summer would be a reasonable-ish time frame to see some rumblings, or maybe beyond some rumblings, but maybe some official words start to come out on who we can expect in LMP2. Until then, I don't know. I'm not really in a mood to go speculating right now because I'm not too good at it.
I guess that's something to look forward to.
Sure. The only other thing I was going to say on the topic of LMDh was the Andretti thing, which we kind of touched on earlier. There are quite a few manufacturers still attending the LMDh technical meetings. I think actually SportsCar 365 reported at least 16 manufacturers are involved in the technical meetings. So the only
one of them's probably not Mazda, right?
Oh, one of them's definitely not Mazda if they ruled it out.
Yep.
No, one of them probably would have been Mazda because it said had been involved, so I'm sure Mazda was involved. And then Audi, Porsche, and Acura are the only 3 confirmed so far. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have anything else to touch on that subject. We'll just have to see where the drivers end up. Actually, I do want to say that real quick because the drivers from that program, a lot of them were actually ex-Audi drivers. Actually, I say a lot of them. It was really just Jarvis. Oliver Jarvis was a former Audi Sport Team Yost driver who came over from the RE Team program. Well, now Audi's coming back, so I'm wondering, maybe we'll see him hop over to the Audi LMDh program if he continues full time. And then I could see just some of the other drivers possibly going over to a Ford LMDh program with Multimatic. I don't, that's not confirmed yet that Ford's doing an LMDh program. I think it's likely, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Multimatic picks it up with some of their drivers going over.
I would love to see that because obviously, if Multimatic takes over, they wouldn't be running an Oreca. They'd be running the Riley. They'd be picking up that chassis and running with Ford, and it'd be way cooler than just having Orecas.
Well, you're
theoretically, hypothetically.
Yeah, you're talking next LMP2 regulations here, which
hypothetically. Oh, that's true. They wouldn't be running with it. Still, though, you really think Multimatic would jump into and use an Oreca? You don't think they'd build an LMP2 chassis?
Well, the problem is they haven't been able to sell their LMP2 chassis because they've just been so uncompetitive. So, if I were them right now, would I go out and say, yeah, let's make another LMP2 chassis that might be unsuccessful? It doesn't make much sense to me.
Sounds like fun, though.
Fun doesn't always make financial sense. Remember that. Caught me mid-water sip there. Gam Wolfer said, oh boy, we could get Andretti Acura versus Penske Porsche Part 2. Yeah, that would be great. I can say that. I started watching ALMS. My first race was the 2008 Northeast Grand Prix at Lime Rock. And those were certainly the glory days. I still miss them. On that note of Penske Porsche, I think that's sort of something that people have been looking at. Porsche is one of the confirmed LMDh manufacturers. And while, Penske left Acura at the end of the last season, or Acura left Penske, whichever way you want to look at it, it's no secret that Roger has been wanting to return to Le Mans. Porsche already said that they're planning on returning to Le Mans with their LMDh car. Connect the dots. Let's just say that for now. I guess we'll move on to Kyle's neck of the woods here. I want to talk about some IndyCar stuff. There's not too much in terms of hard news from this week. We're still in the midst, just sort of the IndyCar off season.
It's February 16th. NASCAR already started. They're going to have like 3 or 4 races done by the time IndyCar gets their first in. It's kind of depressing, I'm not going to lie. Because it's starting to... What's weird is how when IndyCar always starts like in the beginning of March, or like even the end of March, I keep thinking in my head, like, oh man, it's only like 2 or 3, maybe a month until IndyCar starts. And it's like, no, you got to wait until April. You still have another month to go after this one. So it's the off season in IndyCar world just, never ends. It's just never ending.
Well, at least they got rid of the month-long gap between St. Pete and Barber. Right?
Oh, yeah. When IndyCar gets here, we're going to be treated to a lot of racing, which is going to be awesome. But until then, we're just stuck in the icy cold winter with nothing to do but just stare at some snow.
You should just be glad you had a season that ended in October last season. Was it like right before Halloween?
Oh, that's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
This show is just me being bitter about IndyCar. That's what I've realized just now. Yeah. It's just me being bitter.
So one of the only pieces of hard news I have on the IndyCar front was Helio Castroneves is now confirmed to be running at Nashville with Meyer Shank.
Is that it? Is that all you got?
That's all I've got for now. If you want to butt in, you can.
Charlie Kimball will be running the Indy 500 with AJ Foyt in the Grand Prix of Indianapolis and in the Indy 500, which is interesting.
Well, actually, I was going to say that too, but I thought you meant, is that all I had on that subject? Which I guess I'll say yes.
You said one thing I have, and then you said Elio, and I was like, wait,
I thought I said a few things I have on.
Oh, I think you said one. Whatever. But yeah, I said it. Charlie Kimball's going to be running the Indy 500 this year and the Grand Prix of Indy, which is interesting because it confirms that he doesn't have the full-time seat anymore in the 4-car. It's pretty much been all but confirmed because they haven't... Have they said Dalton Kellett was going to run full-time with him? Or did I miss that?
I don't believe they did.
Because I swear they haven't said that. But he's been testing Sebring in the 4-car. And obviously with Bourdais being in the 14 car, they weren't going to be able to do the whole time. They weren't going to be able to do what they did last year and run Kellett in some races and bring in who else was in the 14 last? Oh, Kanan. Oh, that's weird. But Kanan in the 14 and all that, and then Bourdais in the end, they're not going to be able to do that anymore. So is the 4 car going to be part time? Is Kellett going to be full time? I think Kellett will be full time, honestly. But we'll have to wait and see until the official announcement. So yeah, Foyt confirms their 3rd car pretty early in the year, which is different for them. Charlie Kimball's a good guy in the ovals. I think he should. I honestly think it'd be better for him to find an oval only ride and just run Texas and Indy and Gateway, and well, that's it. But
Kyle, Kyle, you and I are both clowning right now.
what
Because Kellett was confirmed
did they do that?
for the full time seat back in December.
I don't blame myself or you for forgetting that because it's a thing.
But Charlie Kimball's not in the 4 car, isn't he in the number 11 car?
Uh,
We are so uneducated. I love how, like, right before this episode, I was like, all right, what are we going to talk about? And we said we're going to wing it, and this is what happens when we try to
hold on,
wing
this
it.
is gonna be super unprofessional. Alexa, be quiet. I don't know what just happened. My Alexa
You're
started
not being
playing music.
productive. Let me butt in,
It
and
just
I'll
started
say,
playing music. I don't know. What do you want me to do?
oh, well, yes, Kimball is running the number 11 car for this season. So far, it's only the GP and the 500, like you said. Dalton Kellett is in the 4, and Sebastian Bourdais is in the 14. The 4 and the 14 are both full time.
Yeah. So pretty much like I predicted. Like, well, predict. What do you mean? Like I said. So I'm still like bamboozled right now because my Alexa just started like randomly playing music. I'm kerfuffled, I guess is the word. I don't know. But whatever. Anyways, Kimball should run the ovals. He is running the GP. Um, Kellett didn't do all that good last year, but I'm hoping with a full-time ride and a bit more experience, he can do a bit more. He made some, questionable. I saw him make some question. I love Dalton Kellett. I really want him to succeed. I really do. But I mean, when the leaders get to you, don't give them a fight. I saw that a couple times out of Kellett last year. That was pretty, and just times when he like was just racing guy like there's been like times where I've seen a battle for like 10th and Kellett just like went for it. In Mid Ohio, I remember specifically, he just like went for like a dive bomb in the S's on a guy who was like 12th, a lap ahead of him. And it was like, what are you doing? Um, it was just weird. But I hope he improves. I want him to do well. For sure at the ovals at times, especially at the 500 this year. I think he just he did what he needed to do, and he was just consistent and didn't crash the car. So yeah, that's all you can really ask out of him.
So that's all we have on the subject of IndyCar this week.
Um, I mean, yeah. We can talk about the Road to Indy series a little bit.
Go ahead, it's all yours.
Obviously, it's very interesting because finally, after a year off, Indy Lights is coming back, which is neat. I'm very excited for that. It's gonna be very weird to see that series come back because I actually attended every single Road to Indy race last year with the USF 2000 and Indy Pro 2000, and honestly, that kind of became kind of normal. So it's really I'm really excited for Indy Lights this year. Andretti's coming back. One of the new faces, Devlin DiFrancesco, coming from the Indy Pro 2000. He's actually a guy who has the funding to get to IndyCar and is going to run Indy Lights for more experience because he just came to the U.S. last year to run Indy Pro. I believe he was going to run Indy Lights last year. And then when that got canned, he found a ride in Indy Pro. He won Gateway, won some other races, did really well with the RP Motorsport / Andretti Autosport team. Carlin Motorsport is going to be coming back to Indy Lights. They weren't in Indy Lights. I think the last 2 seasons they ran in 18 and 19. They might have been there in 18, but they definitely weren't there in 2019. They're coming back. They're bringing Alex Peroni from overseas, and a surprising announcement: Christian Bogle from the J. Howard Motorsports development team. Uh, just they're bringing him. I think he did some testing last year in the lights car. I'm very interested in what he does because we've seen this a couple times where drivers will just jump from USF to Indy Lights. David Malukas did it. He might have ran some Indy Pro races, but he just went straight to lights, kind of out of nowhere. HMD Motorsports Malukas is coming back, and then Nikita Lasashkin. I hope I didn't murder that name, but he's going to be running which HMD. He was supposed to be running last season with Exclusive Autosport, and that team actually ended up, I don't know if they sold or are leasing their chassis, but joining the HMD Motorsports team is going to be Global Racing Group. They're a team that ran in the F3 Americas or FRA, Formula Regional Americas. There's all these different feeder series throughout. There's just so many in North America right now. It really, I really do recommend taking the time and learning all of them, because all these drivers that I'm talking about right now are the future of IndyCar as we know it. So the Global Racing Group joining from FRA, Benjamin Peterson, Linus Lundqvist. Hope I didn't murder that name, but Linus won FRA last year. FRA had some guys like Victor Franzoni literally was just with Victor Franzoni in Miami 3 days ago. My brain is just going bonkers right now. I don't know why, but Victor Franzoni ran in that series last year. Super talented. Linus literally won eight races. He won a lot of races and just dominated that series. He's definitely a talent coming into Indy Lights next year that I think is going to make some noise. And then finally, Juncos, Toby Sowery made a lot of noise with the Pelfrey team in 2019. Came out of nowhere into that series. He really reminds me of a guy like Pato O'Ward, who just kind of came into the lights and in his first, really showed a lot of just raw speed at times. And I do believe he can get that Indy Lights championship and get an IndyCar that way, because I'm not sure how his funding situation is. And then Stingray Robb, obviously winning the Indy Pro 2000 championship last year, going to be coming up the ranks with his same team with Juncos. And he's a really good talent. I'm very excited to see what he does. And obviously, I think it's going to be a star-studded field. Kyle Kirkwood won the Indy Pro championship in 2018. Was supposed to run lights last year. Before that got canceled, I think there was a lot of hype behind Kirkwood and lights in the beginning of last year, and now we finally get to see it this year. He's with Andretti. Daniel Frost is really freaking good. He did really well in Indy Pro 2000 last year. Had to run a second season of that before lights, which he was supposed to run last year again. And then the returning chicken tendies, Robert McGinnis, a lot of experience out of him, and a lot of the big. I mean, he's probably at this point, him and Malukas and Sowery are the most experienced guys in this field. But at the same time, you have a lot of young talent coming in, but they're going to be rookies in lights this year. So you have all these, different angles and stories coming into this year, and I'm really excited to see how this plays out. And then some other news. I'm not going to go everybody in the other ranks. We have Enzo Fittipaldi, who's going to be running in the Indy Pro 2000 category, the second step of the road to Indy before Indy Lights. He's going to be running the Andretti Autosport /RP Motorsport entry, the same one that Devlin DiFrancesco ran in. You might have seen DiFrancesco's car last year. He was the WTF1 car that was running in North America. That was interesting. But Enzo Fittipaldi, we got another Fittipaldi coming to the States. I mean, maybe he'll be running on the same weekends as Pietro if Pietro comes in IndyCar, Jack Miller, the son of Dr. Jack Miller, is going to be coming to Indy Pro. He ran a couple years in USF. Did really, showed a lot of improvement in 2020 and in USF, moving up the ranks to Indy Pro this year. He's going to be one to watch. Um, I'm not going to talk about him too much because it's obviously biased, but Braden Eves will be back with exclusive Autosport in the number 91. That's my championship pick, but I'm not going to go over that too much. I don't want to be too biased and just, ramble about that. But and then announcement today, Cameron Shields will be running with D-Force. Cameron Shields is he's Australian and New Zealander, but he's one of the guys that Will Power has been kind of looking over, and he actually showed a lot of talent in USF when he ran. I don't think he ran all of the races, but I believe he did win. He at least won the pole for St. Pete last year. Might have won the race. He did, he did pretty well in USF. He's a pretty quick talent, and I mean, on the D-Force team this year, he'll do very. I think he'll do very well. Just a lot of names to look over, and then obviously in USF, the bottom rank, Miles Rowe was confirmed to be running for the Force Indy team, which is the USF team that is now being affiliated with Team Penske, which is interesting to see Penske kind of being somewhat involved in the road to Indy because they just never have. And then we have a couple other Christian Brooks returning with exclusive Autosport, and then their second car, the only confirmed car, the second confirmed car for them is Billy Frazier, coming from New Zealand. Josh Green moving from Cape to Turn 3 Motorsport. A lot of interesting. And then we have a new team, Joe Dueling Autosports with Trey Burke. And something that makes me happy is he's a guy who's actually been running dirt racing. He has a midget program as well as I don't might have ran 305s, but he's actually a dirt racer, dipping his toes into USF, which I love to see. So just a lot of stories up and down Road to Indy this year, and it's so good to have the Indy Light Series back. A lot of Alex Peroni coming over. I already saw a comment, flying Alex Peroni. I mean, people obviously know him from overseas. Then we have Kirkwood. I think Kirkwood for the last couple of years has probably been the biggest talent coming through the ranks, kind of like how Askew was. I mean, in the Road to Indy, if you haven't followed it, I highly recommend you do, by the way. Road to Indy actually has great content on YouTube if you go and look at it. They do great stuff. But every couple of years, you'll have, that one guy where you'll hear about them briefly in USF. You'll hear about them more in Indy Pro. And then when they make it to lights, they make a big splash. Guys like Oliver Askew, Pato. I mean, I remember hearing about Askew back in his first year of USF because he was just winning everything. And it was ridiculous. It was so ridiculous how much he was winning. Just you hear about it, and Kirkwood is that guy. And so he's going to be very entertaining to watch this year in lights, which we finally get to see him. You awake, Chris? You still here?
No, I'm still here. It's just man, I've gotten a breather on that one. We've had a couple questions. I'd say quite a few questions since you were going over all that. I'm just going to stick to the related ones for now, and I do want to touch back on some of the...
Well, first off, did you learn anything, Chris?
I learned a lot, Kyle.
Okay.
In all honesty, I don't pay too much attention to the Road to Indy ladder. I really should.
Well, you should.
Exactly. But, so yeah, I mean, it wasn't, you can educate me on a ton of stuff based on everything you just said. Like I was saying, I do want to get back to the slightly unrelated questions in a few minutes here, so stick around. But I did see one. Gam Wolfer said Mazda said they would be focused on grassroots. The Road to Indy is kind of that. Do you think they could do a comeback to Road to Indy? Well, Mazda /AER still does the engines for the Road to Indy ladder. And
kind of.
Well, what do you mean kind of?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's still yeah.
So in terms of
sponsoring, they just don't put any money into it.
Yeah. It's really just in terms of do they sponsor it? I mean, they could. This is where I say I'm terrible at speculation. As I said, Mazda is definitely under a change in direction right now from where they were. They do, like you said, they do want to focus on more grassroots racing. I think it's certainly a possibility, but I wouldn't be really banking on it. I don't think that it's. If I had to guess, I wouldn't say it's in their direct, line of tasks right now. I think that they're going to focus more on like the MX5 Cup series. I could be wrong though. Let's see. Macaulay Davies was asking about the road to Indy. Just to quickly sort of give you an analogy, it doesn't. It's not 1-to-1 because there are 3 road to Indy series. There's the USF 2000 series. There's the Indy Pro 2000, which was formerly Pro Mazda, and then Indy Lights. So if you want to make the connection to F1, you can think of USF 2000 sort of as like a Formula 4, even though Formula 4 is not really technically in the F1 ladder, the official F1 ladder. And then Pro 2000 would be F3, Indy Lights would be F2, and of course IndyCar F1. The only thing that you're missing, Kyle, is you're talking about all these highlights for the road to Indy, considering last season there was no Indy Lights series. And it's still just bugging me that we're missing the Freedom 100 because,
Oh
how
my
many
God.
how
You
many
had to say it.
entries did you say that we have in Indy Lights next season?
Uh, I'm not like 100% sure we have all of them yet, and all of these are confirmed. Right now it's 13 that I
13.
have. I have a little Google Docs, just like I have for the actual IndyCar series. I get bored at work sometimes. I just make a Google Docs of entry lists, supposed entry lists.
Which was actually, that's way healthier than Indy Lights was
Yeah, because
back
we
a
got
couple of
Carlin
years ago.
back, and
Yeah.
Global Racing Group got the chassis that Exclusive Autosport had, and they expanded with HMD. So we have a new team, which also we have new teams all throughout the Road to Indy this year because, Velocity Racing Development, they're bringing teams, and there's just all sorts of stuff going on. It's all healthy. It's great.
I guess our Save the Freedom 100 didn't really work out that well, did it?
Yeah, because we don't
In
have the Free
retrospect.
100 back when we should, Roger.
Um, all right, I guess I'm just going to loop back to those final questions and then we're going to wrap it up for this episode. Somebody asked earlier on, let's see, where was it? Kingsley asked, so is Ford entering LMDh? Again, speculation says likely. Official word says nothing yet. So we'll have to wait on that one. I saw another question about the... Jill Hughes said, why is the Riley/Multimatic LMP2 car so uncompetitive? The main thing with that car was that it was just extremely draggy. So when you're on a track like Le Mans especially, or Daytona, it's really a huge problem because you're generating a ton of drag while not having enough downforce to sort of... Basically, you're generating too much drag. That's the only explanation I can give on that. You're not quick enough in the straight line. The Orica is probably the most slippery, if you will, of the... well, actually, no, the Dallara probably is, but the Orica is the best all-rounder, if I had to guess.
You know what, though? I don't want to hear it because, there's that team called Spirit of Daytona that, like, went out there and led laps at Daytona, with it.
2017 Rolex 24 when everybody was
Did
falling out.
did Spirit of Daytona complain about drag? No, they went out there and they led laps, Chris. They led laps.
They didn't complain verbally, but they complained with their wallet when they switched to a Cadillac.
Okay, that was all Tristan Baudier's fault. Okay, we all know it.
That was a harsh reality, wasn't it? I think we're gonna wrap it up for this episode. On a Tuesday, which is something I didn't point out at the beginning of the episode. We're supposed to be doing these Mondays. Just had some slight scheduling conflicts with Kyle getting back from Florida this weekend and all that fun stuff. So next week we should be back on the right time, Monday at 9 p.m. instead of Tuesday. What?
Unless I miss my flight, which I'll try not to do for the people.
What flight are you going on now?
I'm going to Ocala this weekend. Ocala, Florida. Yep.
Oh, I don't know. Okay. So you're going back to Florida.
Yeah.
Why did you even leave? You realize at this point
'Cause
you're like Florida, home for a week, Florida, home for
Yeah.
a week, Florida.
Because I have to come home and work and make more money. It's a life. It's a life, Chris.
Anyway, that's not really too related to this podcast, unless Kyle misses his flight, in which case I'll let you know on the community tab and on Twitter, hopefully. And we'll just go from there. Anyway, for this episode of the Rain Race Podcast, thank you all for sticking around. If you want to listen to the episode on a podcasting platform, it'll be up tomorrow night on podcasting platforms everywhere. Till then, you can subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a future live podcast. Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week.